Hello, everyone. Good morning, and welcome back to day number 3 of SCGCon. It is time for another wonderful pregame show as we got to get ready to cover the top 8 of the StarCityGames.com Season 1 Invitational. Cedric Phillips early this morning from the Berglund Center in Roanoke, Virginia. And I'm, of course, joined by my 3 colleagues here. Number 1, Todd Anderson. How are you?
It is too early. I'm used to sleep. I'm used to sleeping in.
It's not even 10 o'clock.
I know. It's not that early. I've been up since 7. So
Good. There you go.
I got some Red Bull in me. I'm not really a coffee guy.
Good.
I'm ready to watch some great Magic today and see somebody get their own token.
Yeah.
That's gonna be nice.
That's for sure. A lot of people have the opportunity to get their own token. A lot of money on the line as well here early on this morning. Matthias Hunt, how are you? Ooh, a hat tip. Like, are you incorporating that often or just right now?
Right now.
Just right now? Okay, well done. Ryan, how are you going to improvise with my introduction for you? You don't have a hat tip?
I that's a really hard act to follow. I had a joke about how early it was, but then the hat thing changed the pace of the conversation. And I'm in a lot of trouble right now.
I can take it away. Do you need
All
me
right, just make it go
back. Divert it. Okay, great. I guess we're going to be stuck talking about Magic then there this morning. Which, all jokes aside, this one should be pretty good as we've got a lot of diversity here in the top 8. First and foremost, for you humans haters out there, you win. There are none.
You know what? Split format tournament. Whatever. People who played humans played bad decks in standard. The end.
That may be true. But really not much humans. Actually, in the event, as we took a look at the metagame breakdown, there's a lot of Jeskai control here this weekend, and we will talk about at least one player who's playing that deck in the top 8, Gerard Fabiano, soon enough. But we are going to start on the left side of our bracket here early this morning. We're going to start with the number 1 overall seed, and we kind of had a feeling, as we discussed in the pregame show, that this could be a good option, and Joseph Stempo has certainly made that be the case here with Mardu Pyromancer. Good against humans, good against Jeskai, good against a bevy of other things as well. The question for our number 1 overall seed is his deck good against Ironworks combo? Because that is what his opponent, number 8 overall seed, Zach Elsick, is playing. Todd, I'm going to start with you. Elsick loves to play an unorthodox deck. Stempo loves to wear goofy hats.
Nice.
Apparently.
Yeah. I didn't know that was a thing.
But Stempo is playing a pretty good deck here.
Yeah. Stempo's deck, it's obviously very strong, but I think it's more of a deck that preys on fair strategies.
Sure.
Cards like Bedlam Reveler, heavy amounts of removal, these are cards that are really good against creature-based decks. Zach Elsick, yes, he's got some creatures in his deck, but whenever they die, they usually bring something back.
Yep.
And if you ever falter playing against this Ironworks combo deck, they can kill you in one gigantic turn. It's very similar to playing against the second Sunrise Eggs decks that we saw get a ban after winning a Pro Tour
a couple of years ago.
6 years ago.
Yeah.
It
was Pro Tour Seattle. Pro Tour Return to Ravnica. Yeah.
But, I don't think that the Mardu deck has the tools to combat this Ironworks combo deck. We saw Matthew Nass win Grand Prix recently with the archetype, and it looked easy.
Yeah.
And that format seemed like it was more full of people trying to play straightforward, fair decks, and Matthew Nash just crushed it.
Besides, I'm going to come over to you. Here's the interesting thing about this Mardu Pyromancer deck. It kind of cleans up on creature decks. It's very good against Jeskai because it can go long with it. This deck that Elsick's playing is obviously a combo deck. It's a rather unique one as well. I feel like there are some good cards that Stempo has here. Maybe Blood Moon's okay in the matchup. Obviously, a card like Collective Brutality and Discard's going to be good. And Cooldown's Command's going to be good, but there's also a lot of misses like Lightning Bolt, Fatal Push, Dreadbore Terminates. Faithless Looting can help you discard that, but is that something that we feel that Stempo can overcome? It seems like he's got a lot of dead ones in the matchup.
Yeah, the issues with the fact is that the Mardu Pyromancer deck, it is a control deck in Modern here, but it's a more proactive control deck than something like Jeskai, which would want to sit back on some counter spells and play that way. Mardu has difficult to present threats, and it relies on Blood Moon to sometimes shore up some things, but the issue is, Zach can win through a Blood Moon. A resilient but slow threat like Lingering Souls just really doesn't play here. And while Joe Stempo can Faithless Looting away his deck cards, which I think he'll have to do, the question is what live cards is he even really drawing to? This is going to be uphill for him in the first 2 games, but post-board I actually think he can keep it close.
Yeah, interesting here as I take a look at Stempo's sideboard. Leyline of the Voids look like they can play a role here. Don't really have much love for Molten Rain or Liliana the Last Hope. Engineered Explosives can be okay in certain spots, Ryan. Same thing can be said for Wear, Tear, and Council of Allocation. So there are some cards here. But Elsick also gets to bring some cards to the table, too. What kind of stands out to you in this matchup, if anything?
I mean, the most important card that Stempo has access to is going to be Thoughtseize, discard spells. You hope to choke them, make sure they don't get the Ironworks online in the first place. That's really your best avenue to victory. In general, though, the best things that I have played against Ironworks combo have been counter spells and a fast clock, and Stempo doesn't really have either. Mardu's not even a turn 4 deck, really. I don't know if you can possibly close that quickly with the deck. You really have to grind through them, and the more flimsy your tools are, the less reactive they are in a meaningful way, and I don't think that Kolaghan's Command is actually especially impactful. You maybe buy a turn, but sometimes you don't even do that. Say that they have access to 2 Ironworks in the same turn, you won't even get that much time, and I do feel like there's a lot of things going against Stempo in this matchup.
Yeah, I just don't know. I'm not sure how Stempo can kind of come back here. Obviously, it sounds like we're all kind of siding with Elsic here, and we'll get to our pick'ems here in just a moment. But when we see a situation like this, I'm always trying to craft a game plan of how can Stempo get lucky, or what are the cards he's trying to mulligan towards. I think it involves Young Pyromancer, at least in the first couple of games, maybe in all of the games, Todd, where he's got to get Young Pyromancer into spells or into Lingering Souls and just try to kill really quick until we discard spells. But the clock isn't very fast, and Bedlam Reveler, one of the best cards in the deck, and Stempo's playing 4 copies, not even particularly good here.
No, so Bedlam Reveler is especially powerful when you can proactively use all of these cheap spells to interact with your opponent, and then you get to recoup after trading all those 1-for-1s. Even though a lot of creatures your opponents might play, killing their creature, they still have some value left over. Like, you know, you have to use 2 things to kill a Kitchen Finks. Sometimes you have to use 2 lightning bolts to kill a Tarmogoyf. That's where Bedlam Reveler comes in and really turbocharges this deck. But if he's got all these cards stuck in hand, like Dreadbores, you know,
Terminates,
like you know, it's just going to be a bad time. And the fact that this is a best of 5 with 2 games pre-board, I think really heavily favors Zach Elsic in this matchup. But cards like Leyline of the Void are particularly great in this matchup, and he could potentially steal some post-sideboard games with those powerful sideboard cards. Even Blood Moon is pretty good. I think that the Ironworks combo relies on some of these specialty lands to be more consistent. Buried Ruin, very good. Inventor's Fair, a way to find Clark Kent Ironworks once your opponent's able to make you discard 1 or destroys 1. So we could see Blood Moon and Leyline of the Void playing a big role. I very much expect Elsic to bring in some sort of disenchant effect to help combat both of those.
Yeah, and that's the thing, Matthias. Todd already mentioned it. The disenchant effect is what's going to make it tough. There are 4 copies of Nature's Claim here, and if we even want to dig a little deeper, I don't know how deep Zach's going to go, but he's got 2 copies of Wormcoil Engine, too, that he can go towards, which is going to be difficult for Mardu Pyromancer to answer. It just seems like everything's coming up Elsic here. I don't know.
Yeah, all can actually do some work here. Remove that as well. The card I'm looking for this matchup, pre and post board, it's a boring one, but I think Faithless Looting is going to be a key here.
Yep. Ryan, anything else to add before we make our pick'ems? Again, I feel like we're all siding towards Zach here. I don't really see it for Joe. I'm trying, but I don't really see it.
I mean, the most similar deck that I've played to Mardu Pyromancer has been the Jund version of Death Shadow. That's a deck with a lot of the same interactive elements and a faster clock, and I still just get beat up by Ironworks. So yeah, I don't like the matchup for Joe.
Yep, neither do I, and I think as you're going to take a look at our pick'ems here, you're going to find the same thing. I'm siding with Zach Elsic here. We'll get the right pick'em up here in just a moment, but I am siding with Zach Elsic because I just don't see it for Joe. I can't figure out a path to victory for him here. He might get a game, mulligans are a thing, whatever, but this Ironworks deck is pretty consistent, and with that in mind, I just discard or pick him apart, but the problem here is that Zach isn't going to die fast. He'll get some draw stats to be able to do his thing, and ultimately I think Elsic's going to win. Todd, I come to you.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the thing about Modern. If you're playing against one of these hyperlinear combo decks or hyperlinear aggro decks, and you can't put a clock on them, they have so much time to set up that your small amounts of disruption is not going to even compare to the heavy amounts of dead cards that you draw. Like we've already talked about, like Lightning Bolt, yes, it can go to the face. That doesn't really matter. You have all these cards that don't really put a clock on your opponent. Young Pyromancer is going to be his best bet, but it's just going to be too slow.
All right, he's going with Elsic too. Matthias?
I am going to go with Zach Elsic also. I do think that Joe can keep some of this close. This deck's not completely bad here. I expect him to get 1 game of the series, and I wouldn't even be surprised if he gets 2.
Ryan, are you as optimistic?
Not so much. I think 1 is pretty close to the ceiling for Joe here. Unfortunately, I did go with Zach Elsic, and just the fundamental aspect of this matchup is Mardu Pyromancer is trying to capitalize on how creature-oriented the modern format is, and Ironworks combo is trying to capitalize on the fact that people are aware of that other fact and have a bunch of creature removal. And that's what the matchup is, creature removal versus the creatureless combo deck.
Yeah, well, I think Nick Miller is going to make it a clean sweep.
Oh, no.
There you go, Zach Elsick.
Not a clean sweep.
Why would you? Why? Why?
Because you brought up Jim Davis the other day on
who
camera.
got swept recently? Huh?
Who?
Who got not the Cleveland Cap? Let's move on.
Yeah.
Let's move on. Zach Elsick, get the broom out there for him. We'd be a little surprised if he wasn't able to get the job done there. As we get ready here for our next match on the left side of the bracket, we'll take a look. It's going to be Austin Collins, back-to-back invitational top eights for the youngster from Kansas City. He's going to do a little affinity action here against Hunter Crott playing green-white hexproof, a deck that I personally am very familiar with. So if we take a look just at game 1 and game 2 pre-sideboard here between the two players, it's just going to be, I'm going to do my thing, you're going to do your thing, let's see who's going to do it better. In instances like this, it generally comes down to, on the hexproof side, if they find a Daybreak Coronet, Matthias. That is what I have found. There are other cards that matter, obviously, Spirit Mantles and Griff's Boons and other stuff, but ultimately, we got 2 ships passing in the night here, and Affinity is, I feel like, sometimes better at doing that, but hexproof, in my opinion, has the Game Breaker and Coronet.
Yeah, Coronet is pretty scary. There's some play still on the Affinity side. Arcbound Ravager can blank a lot of the hexproof draws. Affinity is a deck that can race. You know, this is a turn 4 deck in its own right, so there's going to be some pressure on the hexproof deck to get some of those early draws. This one's reasonably close.
Ryan, are you a hexproof fan? Are you an Affinity fan? Do you know much about this matchup here?
I've played Affinity actually a good amount recently, and this matchup came up quite a bit. With Humans Rising, Hexproof became a particularly popular deck. Affinity sort of rose to battle Humans. Hexproof rose to battle both.
Sure.
When I was preparing for a tournament most recently playing Affinity, I got the Hexproof matchup. Because the things that matter tend to be them drawing Coronet, I would right-click concede match when they played a Slippery Bogle because it was never meaningful testing. You generally lost if they drew Coronet. You had no control over that. The games were never fun or interesting, and I usually lost, and post-sideboard they had Stony Silence too.
Okay, so it sounds like this could be difficult for Affinity here, Todd. That's at least what Ryan's somewhat implying. How do you feel?
So I think Affinity can definitely steal games. Even if they acquire a Daybreak Coronet, sometimes they still need a way to deal with Inkmoth Nexus.
Sure.
The life gain normally will close the door on an aggressive deck, and Coronet is very powerful for that reason. But the sheer fact that you get 4 copies of Inkmoth Nexus and can combine that with both Arcbound Ravager and Cranial Plating means that the Affinity deck can still win even if they get super far behind on life totals. There aren't a lot of aggro decks in the format that can do that. I still think Hexproof has the advantage just because they have quite a few ways to interact with the Inkmoth Nexus with 4 copies of Path to Exile, things like Hyena Umbra, and even Griff's Boon can play a little defense, especially if your creature has Vigilance.
Yep.
So I'm gonna side with the hexproof side of things, but I think it's gonna be close. I would not be surprised at a 3-2 finish.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting here. There are definitely some cards that do matter here for Hunter Crott. Take a look at his deck list. He's got 2 main deck paths, Spider Umbras, which of course give your creature reach. There'll be 4 of those. Coronets, which we've already talked about. We obviously know there's 4 of those. Spirit Mantle allowing you to get through for the hits. There are 2 of those. And Rancor, there are 4. Trample's going to matter in the matchup too. So the tough thing about Hexproof is you don't have any control over what you draw. Right. So if you draw the wrong ones, you're at the mercy of the top, let's call it 15 cards of your deck. And whatever shakes out, shakes out.
I mean, that's certainly true. I think this is amplified, actually. Core Spirit Dancer from Krott's side of the thing. It's usually not great when you're playing against a deck that has a lot of removal, but Affinity is not one of those decks.
Yep.
I believe there's only a few copies of Galvanic Blast from Austin Collins' side of things, and the fact that he's trimming a little bit on removal so that he can play things like Ancient Stirrings to be a little more consistent means that he's going to have a harder time beating Core Spirit Dancer, so the nut draws from this green-white hexproof deck are going to be too much for him to handle.
Yeah, that's what's kind of interesting here, Matthias, about Austin Collins' take on Affinity. He's got these main deck copies of Ancient Stirrings, 3 of those which you generally don't see in Affinity. He's only got 2 copies of Galvanic Blast, so that means that Core Spirit Dancer actually could play a huge role in things. It's a little bit slower because it's a 2-mana spell as opposed to a 1-mana spell, but it'll get a lot bigger than Slippery Boggle and Gladecover Scout if left unchecked.
Yeah, so that opens a window for Core Spirit Dancer, but at the same time, this gives some utility over to Austin Collins. We talked about how cards like Ravager or Inkmoth Nexus can steal games. So what'll happen is Hunter will have an opening and he'll just kind of present his hand. That's what Hexproof does. And once Austin sees what the hand is, I actually wouldn't mind if in this matchup holds back on ancient stirrings. Maybe you find that, hey, okay, there's a big lifelink creature on the ground. All right, I'm going to try to stirrings for an Inkmoth Nexus. I like the stirrings in this matchup.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting addition for sure. We generally don't see that card in Affinity, but obviously it's working here, so perhaps we'll see some updates and changes to Affinity moving forward. Ryan, last one here for you. There are 2 copies of Stony Silence over here for Hunter Crot. Obviously that one, we know how good it is against Affinity. Additional copy of Path to Exile. There's Jamoka's Command hanging out in the sideboard here for a Hunter Crot, which the fighting could play a role in things. There's a Spirit Link, there's 2 Seal Primordiums, so he's actually bringing some pretty good cards to the table against Affinity here in this matchup.
Yeah, that's exactly what's so frustrating about the matchup, is often enough you do lose the pre-sideboarded games. I do feel you're at least a minorly unfavored, probably even more than that. It has felt like maybe 40% in my experience. And then post-sideboard, sometimes in turn 2, they cast a spell that says win the game.
Yep.
And on top of that, they have a lot of pinpoint interaction. And sometimes you can't even beat a Spider Umbra because they can just block your flying creature. There's just all kinds of problems for Affinity. Things get a lot worse post-sideboard.
And yet, with all of that, I'm picking Affinity to win because Affinity does Affinity things sometimes.
Dude, I'm glad we're doing coverage together.
Yeah?
So I can say I told you.
Okay, I'm so glad too. I'm so glad too. Doesn't sound like you are picking Affinity. I'm going with Affinity very quickly here from Austin Collins, simply because Affinity can do Affinity things. And one of the things that's frustrating about Hexproof, 1, deck mulligans like garbage. 2, you are at the mercy of the top cards of your deck. If you don't find Daybreak Coronet, you just don't win a lot of the times.
You don't get a Daybreak Coronet this game.
Yeah, I didn't have one. I drew a bunch of Ethereal Armors and Spider Umbras, and I lost. And I don't like that feeling.
But even you have to agree that when Core Spirit Dancer survives, the likelihood of you finding Daybreak Coronet increases dramatically.
It's very high,
and with
no doubt.
Austin Collins only playing 2 copies of Galvanic Blast, the odds of Core Spirit Dancer surviving is very high.
That's true.
I mean, you've won a PTQ with this deck.
I have. I have, and I have a little bit of bias. Like, when you're running good, you're running good. If you find Coronet in most of your matches, especially matches like this, it's great. But there is a lot of fluff sometimes, I suppose. Maybe this matchup is better than I think, and Hunter is bringing a lot to the table, but I'm going to lean towards young Austin's way. Todd's got Hunter. Matthias, you have?
Yeah, so I agree with what I was saying on paper that Hexproof is a bit of a favorite here. At the same time, I don't think it's entirely, like, Modern is a format of matchups, and matchups matter, but I think deck quality matters, and at the end of the day, like, Affinity is just a better deck than Hexproof. Just It does more powerful things. It has more flexibility, and I'm going to see that I'm picking Austin.
That just doesn't matter. And if you just said it's matchup dependent, but then you say that
it's not all about matchups.
Dependent. It is all about matchups. Absolutely. My entire bracket is filled out based on matchups.
Well, then I guess we're going to see what happens.
Yes, that's true. That's true. Okay. Ryan, down to you.
So, Matthias makes a very good point. Affinity is a better deck. What he has not considered is that there's no justice in the universe. And I do think that Hexproof is going to take this one down. No shade to Hunter Crot. I think he is a very powerful player. I said as much when we covered him earlier in the tournament. Congratulations on the top 8, and I think the top 4.
Nick Miller, we'll see who he's got. He's got Hunter Crot as well. So Matthias, high five. Let's go. Right. Affinity, better deck. We're going to side with that.
Lifetime, you should know this, though. Personally, in matches getting Lifetime, I have never beaten Boggles.
Yeah,
just ever.
I've only been once, and I got very lucky.
I'm against it now. I'm just telling you, your
I used
track
to play
record's not on our side.
Yeah, it's not great, but they have 5 matches. They have 5 games to play. We do not. So we have a right side of the bracket to go over here in just a moment. But before we do that, we'll take a quick break. When we do come back, we're going to take a look at Michael Hamilton versus Gerard Fabiano and Aaron Skripchek against, make sure I don't get the name wrong here, Aaron Barrich, who a lot of people have picked to win this tournament. So we'll see you guys back here for that in just a bit. We are back, everybody. Pregame show for our Season 1 Invitational Top 8 here at SCGCon. Cedric Phillips, Todd Anderson, Matthias Hunt, Ryan Overturf. That's who we got here in the booth for you as we're going to break down the right side of our bracket. Play will be underway here soon enough, but we want to take a look here at Aaron Barrich, who, boy, he made this tournament look pretty darn easy most of the weekend. Todd and I, we had the opportunity to watch his only loss, it looked like, to Emma Handy when Emma was playing Storm. Aaron was playing Infect. Emma, 2 turn 3 kills. Outside of that, Aaron's weekend has been pretty easy. Number 2 overall seed against Anthony Skripchek, who is playing Mono Green Devotion. Light splashes there, but we'll go with Mono Green for now. But it's actually kind of funny because these small splashes are maybe the only thing that will give him a shot in this matchup. Mono Green Devotion is an interesting choice. It's a very powerful deck. You've got Nykthos, you've got Burning Tree Emissary to make you go nuts, Utopia Sprawl, Oath of Nissa to find things you're looking for, Garruk Wildspeaker to generate a boatload of mana, Summoner's Pact to find a whole slew of things like these one-ofs here in Thrun the Last Troll, Eternal Witness, Acidic Slime, Hornet Queen, Crater of Behemoth, yada, yada, yada. Blighted Agent doesn't really care, Todd.
Oh, no.
About any of it.
As I don't want to call myself an Infect aficionado.
Because you're not.
I would call myself a victim of playing Infect.
Okay.
There was a time where I thought Infect was the best deck in Modern.
Okay.
That time is past.
Sure.
But Aaron Barrich is surely proving us wrong. He went 7-1. His only loss in Modern was Emma Handy on camera, where Emma combo killed him with Storm on turn 3 twice.
Yep.
And, sometimes your Infect draw, when you don't have Detection Probe, to power out big become immenses or just be more consistently hitting your early pump spells and early creatures, it gets a little bit more difficult to interact with these combo decks or to be fast enough to race them. But other than that, he won the other 7, so I'm just wrong, I guess. In this particular matchup, I think that Aaron is going to be heavily favored. He's lower to the ground, and these are the kind of decks that you really want to play against when you're playing Infect. Decks without a lot of removal that are linear and are trying to do something that's just slightly slower than you.
Matthias, I'm going to leave you with the unenviable task of telling me why Anthony can win.
So, did you watch his match against Austin Collins, which we had in the, we saw 2 of them play, and the Mono Green Devotion deck has some really powerful starts. Austin had a pretty decent Affinity start, and then Anthony turn 3 Fracturing Gusted him.
That's good against that deck.
Yeah. Now he doesn't have something. There's no Fracturing Gust that hits all creatures with Infect.
Yeah.
So it's a bit tougher. But
that one's called Electrolyze.
Right. Green doesn't really do that.
Sure.
But at the same time, those starts that Mono Green Devotion have can, their nut draws can really beat anything. You could see a turn 3 Hornet Queen, and that could beat Infect for sure.
It can, but I keep going back to what I've seen so much over the years of covering Infect, where if you're playing against Infect, you're always like, come on, Glistener Elf. Come on, Glistener Elf.
Yeah, he's not Blighted Agent.
Most of the time, Ryan, it's Blighted Agent. And ignoring, and this is some real stretching here, Uruk Thar. And looking at the sideboard, there are 2 Kozilek's returns. Worship actually doesn't even do anything. There are 2.
What are you talking about? Worship?
Does Worship work with it?
No, it doesn't.
I was going to say, am I missing something? Yeah. Okay. I was like, I know it's early, but and then there's 2 Walking Ballistas. There's not a lot. Like if a Blighted Agent plus things show up, Ryan, we're done.
A Walking Ballista with enough mana is going to be game over, though.
Yes, I agree.
So and the fact that his deck generates so much mana so quickly, he has 2 copies of Walking Ballista.
You can't play
2 whole copies.
I'm trying to give you content. You want to wait for him to win? Walking Ballista's it.
So if there's a Uruk Thar play, you can play at most 2 pump spells.
Sure. Ryan, to you. Help me, please.
You can't even Summoner's Pack for Walking Ballista. So,
True.
What's even the point? When it comes to beating Infect in Modern, you want your deck to look as boring as possible in the deck red sheet. What are you playing? 1 mana points of interaction because they're good against decks with creatures. And then when you play against the decks that are way cooler, that look like commander decks, you run them over because you're playing a constructed deck and they're playing a commander deck.
Well, I am looking at Anthony's deck list, and it does look like a commander deck, actually, with all of these one-ofs. Of course, Summoner's Pact, Primal Command here to facilitate those things, but there's a lot of nonsense here. Now, Matthias, you're right. He is capable of doing some busted things, but he's also capable of drawing some bad cards. First 2 games are pre-sideboard. Last 3 are post, so he can clean things up. Ultimately, we're going to focus on Aaron here because, Anthony, because Anthony's deck is the more obscure of the 2, and Aaron's deck just kind of does the same thing every game. It's going to play an Infect creature, it's going to try to kill you on turn 3, maybe turn 2 some games. Like a card like Acidic Slime can show up and blow up an Inkmoth next. It's great. Hornet Queen can really gum things up if a Blighted Agent doesn't show up. Great. But it is on, I think, Skripchek's deck, Matthias, to just go nuts, which you guys got to watch it do.
His deck has to go nuts. And I mean, it does have draws, Burning Emissary, Nykthos, it's got the Haymakers, but if both decks just do something, if any of their draws are close to the same level of power, Aaron's going to get it.
For Barrich, I'm taking a look at his sideboard. He doesn't really have to bring a lot to the table. Todd, I know that I was going to bring this up, Geist of St. Trapp, but I don't even think it's about that. I don't even think he has to get that creative.
Geist of St. Trapp does 100% come in against matchups that have the card Lightning Bolt in them.
Sure.
You want Geist of St. Trapp as your backup game plan against these hyper-interactive Mardu, Jeskai, Jund decks, and you don't care about having your opponent play when they don't play any removal spells. When they play no removal spells, you're just playing a full-blown mulligan to Blighted Agent, maybe.
Yep.
Just kill your opponent on turn 3 every game.
Because I do think that Glistener Elf in this matchup is not particularly good. There's going to be a lot of blockers. If Distortion Strikes or Apostle's Blessings, things like that show up, you can win with that. But you're going to rely on Blighted Agent and, of course, Inkmoth Nexus to get the job done. For me, and I don't want to speak for my colleagues, we'll get to each of them. This is Aaron Barrich in a runaway for me. Unless something really weird happens, I just don't see it. Because it's 5 games. If it were 3, sure. But you get to with 5 games, you get to eliminate some of the variants. And Aaron's the number 2 overall seed, so he gets to play first. So him winning game 1 seems very likely. And he'll probably be on the draw for his other games, but it doesn't matter. I just don't see it for Mr. Scriptcheck here. So give me Aaron Barrich. Todd, to you.
So I'm going with Aaron Barrich as well. I think this is a clear-cut case of the modern matchup rodeo,
Sure.
where if your deck is just inherently favored, you're just more likely to win just because of how the decks match up. And we see that, we talked about that earlier with Zach Elsek versus the Mardu Pyromancer deck. It's a very similar case, it's just on the different side of the spectrum.
Yeah.
This Infect deck, I think, can just lose, though, if you don't draw Blighted Agent, and Script Check is able to produce a lot of blockers, especially for Blighted Agent, and maybe later in the game find a Hornet Queen to stifle the Inkmoth Nexus. We could see him steal at least a couple games.
I don't think he can steal 3, though.
I don't think he can steal 3 either, but Infect finds a way sometimes.
Matthias, we come to you.
So last round match we talked about, I picked against the matchup because I talked about what I think the quality of the deck is. The problem is here, I think Infect's a better deck and it's got the matchup. So I don't even know how I would pick against it. I play green ramp decks against Infect. It's always terrible. This one doesn't even have removal. I don't see Script Check taking 3 games. I'm not even sure I see him taking 1.
Ryan, close us out.
Yeah, that's really how I feel about it. I pick Barrich as well. When it comes to Infect, your worst matchups in a weird way are frequently the actual more popular decks in Modern, and the more fringe your opponent's deck is, the better your matchup tends to be, just because you're so fast. And people might be ready to deal with 1 or 2 threats, but they can almost never do it in the face of Blossoming Defense. And the efficiency of that kind of interaction is so powerful. It doesn't really come up in this matchup, but it doesn't have to. You just get to land a threat with evasion and just clock them on turn 3.
Nick Miller is going to make it another broom here for 2 of our matchups, but I think this last one, I don't know if we've got a broom here for this last one, but I do think this one's going to be really good. It's going to be our first feature match of the weekend. It's going to be Michael Hamilton playing Mardu Hollow One against Gerard Fabiano playing Jeskai Control. We label it Mardu Hollow One because of the splash for Lingering Souls from Michael Hamilton. He, along with Gerard, are both coming off of Invitational Top 8s, our last time out in December in Roanoke. So congratulations to both of them on making it back to the Top 8 here this weekend. Fabiano, the bigger name of the 2, for sure. Gerard's reputation and his results certainly don't need any introduction. For Michael Hamilton, he needs more of one, and he might be making a name for himself this weekend if he didn't already in that last Invitational. For Hamilton, I think he's got a great matchup here. Just straight up, we watched Todd and I, Owen Turtenwald, just destroy Jim Davis. It wasn't even close. And obviously, Owen is one of Magic's best players of all time, but just, you didn't have to be great to say, hey, Jeskai Control, you really can't beat Bloodghast and Flame Wake Phoenix, or me playing a Hollow One on turn 1, because your bolts and your helixes don't do anything. And Michael Hamilton has the same luxury afforded to him, and he gets Lingering Souls, Todd.
Yeah, plus, we've already seen a lot of bad draws from Hollow One this weekend.
Yep.
So I full-blown expect Hollow One to go off in the top 8.
They're due.
That's how things work.
They're just
They're
due.
due.
That's how things work.
On top of that, just having the resilient threats, not only the Flamewake Phoenix and the Bloodghast are going to be very difficult for Gerard to deal with, but on top of that, Gerard also has to deal with Lingering Souls I think this one's Mardu Pyromancer, or Mardu Hollow One all the way.
Yeah, I think this is going to be really, really tough for Fabiano here, Matthias. Now look, he's got some interesting cards in his deck that you don't sometimes see in Jeskai control decks. He's got like one Restoration Angel, and Gerard likes to play some funky ones. If you've ever tracked his decks, he loves to play some funky cards. He's got like a random Karn, which I don't think plays a role very much in the matchup. He's got this Jace the Mind Sculptor, which I think is pretty bad. He's got a main deck Timely Reinforcements, which can be bad or good in some spots, but ultimately I don't think it plays a huge role in things. His sideboard is kind of interesting as well, but it's just kind of the normal things that you're going to see here in stuff like Celestial Purge. There's a Lyra Dawnbringer, which can be good in the matchup, but Michael has access to his sideboard, so he can prepare accordingly if he'd like. This seems really, really hard.
You said Gerard has all these one-ups in his deck, and the first thing I thought is, I bet they're all 4-drops. And then you just started listing Restoration Angel, Karn, Jace. It's like, yep, all right.
Yep.
Gerard top-8'd, yep. You know, I always look at Gerard's deck lists, and I always think, man, he just took his control deck and turned it all mid-range, and I don't even understand why he's doing it. But Gerard's results do speak for themselves. He consistently does well at our invitationals, been to the Players' Championship doing this kind of stuff. And he seems to find a way in matchups that I swear he can't win. Because he plays these more powerful cards that, yeah, they're slower, but they have more angles, and Gerard is very comfortable at finding max value out of those kind of cards in matchups. You're right, this is going to be a tougher one, and if Hollow One does its thing, I agree. It looks pretty good on paper. At the same time, Jeskai is a very consistent deck, and Gerard's deck's going to consistently do some powerful stuff. It could line up either way.
Well, I think a lot of where Fabiano's equity in the Swiss came from, Ryan, is these unorthodox cards that I talked about, like the Jace, like the Restoration Angel, like the Timely Reinforcements. You don't know he's got those game one. You don't know they're in his deck at all. Decklist being available is a real advantage here, I think, more so for Michael than Gerard. But if I tell you Michael's playing Mardu Hollow One, great, I know what's in your deck. Now, can I do anything about it? That's a different story. With Fabiano, now you know the Restoration Angel. It looks a little weird, 4 mana on your own turn. I just play around Cryptic and Resto now, which, once you know that, you can do. So I think that actually gives Michael a distinct advantage, but ultimately, again, Bloodghast and Flamewake Phoenix make this tough, and then there's all the other stuff that go along with it.
Yeah, Bloodghast just comes back for 0 mana with landfall. Flamewake Phoenix, as long as you maintain a 4-power creature, which your creatures with 4 power have more than 3 toughness. So I don't understand how Restoration Angel is any meaningful part of that equation.
That's true.
It just doesn't engage in combat in any way that really matters to you. I do admire Gerard's discipline to not splash Ashiok in this deck, as he probably really wanted to do. But I don't think he brought tools that are really going to help him in this matchup in a meaningful way.
Yeah, I don't think there's a lot here for Gerard. I don't know if you feel he can win this, if there's a way for him to win this. Traditionally, Hollow One has a tough time against. Traditionally, Jeskai has a tough time against Hollow One.
So it's Gerard. He can find a way to win.
He plays very well.
He's using all parts of the buffalo.
Yeah.
I actually really like the look of Gerard's deck list, and I think that me and him have a lot of similar ideas when it comes to deck building. Last Invitational, he played a teamer deck that's just not a deck.
Sure.
I play it, but it's just not an archetype in Modern.
Yep.
And he got second place. It was insane. This time around, though, I think cards like Restoration Angel and Vendilion Click can give him that angle that he might need to steal games. But yes, he is going to have a bunch of mediocre removal spells against these resilient creatures. Not only are his burn spells not great at killing Hollow One or Gurmag Angler, they're also not great at killing Bloodghast or Flamewake Phoenix permanently.
Yep.
He's going to be relying on drawing a lot of Path to Exiles, a lot of Snapcaster Mages to bring those back, and if the board gets too dirty, he's going to need to draw Supreme Verdict to clean it up. With that said, I could easily see a game where the Mardu Hollow One opponent takes too much damage from their mana sources, fetching Blood Crib, trying to make sure Bloodghast comes back, trying to make sure they can actually cast all their spells. And Gerard just goes Burn Face, Vendilion Click, attack, Restoration Angel, save myself from lethal damage, attack, snap, burn you out. There's
an avenue, but it's going to be tough.
Sure.
It's going to be tough. That's how I feel. And that is why I'm picking Michael Hamilton to win the match. If the Owen Jim match at Ledar tournament is any indication, as great as Gerard is, and as much success as he has had, especially on the SCG Tour, I think this is just too much to overcome. He's got these wonky cards and these creative lines that he can find. But as you mentioned, Path to Exile, only 3 copies. You got to cut something to fit that Resto and that Karn. And in this matchup, that's going to come back to hurt him, I think. Give me Michael Hamilton. Probably in 5 games, but I'll take Michael Hamilton.
I'm going to take Michael Hamilton as well. I do think that these resilient creatures and the fact that a lot of Gerard's removal is invalidated by these creatures, is going to give Hamilton the advantage. But again, it's Gerard. He's a great player. He can find ways to win. He's a great deck builder. There's a chance.
Matthias, to you.
So you guys made the argument that with the deck lists face up, Michael will know all of Gerard's one-ofs and they will be less effective. Michael will be able to plan around them. But I'm going to go a different way with that. With deck lists face up, that's just going to be an advantage for Gerard Fabiano. He's got so much experience that knowing exactly what his opponent can board in and everything in the list, sure, Michael can make an advantage of it, but I think Gerard's going to get a bigger advantage of it just on experience. He's got the tools, and I'm going to go with Gerard Fabiano.
Let's go over to Ryan.
It's just the bottom line for me is that you have a removal spell deck against a deck that's generating 0 and 1 mana threats, some of them that come back time and again. I think that the advantage goes to Hollow One there pretty clearly. I'm picking Hamilton. I like what Todd's saying about Gerard's plan to get aggressive and steal games. You won't always have those opportunities, not just because you only have so many cards, but Hamilton's best draws just won't allow you to do that. When you produce a few Bloodghast early, or just the Hollow One draw where you get 2 Hollow Ones on turn 1, you can't get aggressive against that.
Yeah, and that's the other thing that we haven't really worked in the equation. As you see, Nick has picked Michael Hamilton. Sorry about that whammy, Matthias.
I'm going to be up 1-0.
We didn't even really talk about the fact that because you can't really control it, but Hollow One does have that backdoor of just like, hey, this on turn 1, your turn. Like I have 2 of these, and you can't do anything about it. Where Jeskai doesn't have anything like that.
So, I don't mean to chime in here too much, but the one thing that I really like about Gerard's build of this deck is that he can use Cryptic Command aggressively. We see a lot of these Jeskai control decks just use Cryptic Command a lot of times basically as tap while your team draw a card. Mm-hmm. They don't really gain any traction. They're just digging for the Supreme Verdict or digging for the final burn spell, final 2 burn spells, hopefully. The Vendilion Cliques main and the Restoration Angel main and the Secure the Waste main all give Gerard a way to explosively use Cryptic Command aggressively, not only to just make sure he doesn't die, but to also make sure that there are no blockers in the way for him later on, especially because Hamilton has access to Lingering Souls in his main deck. So, again, I think that Hamilton will probably take the match, but Gerard has a very good shot, and I wouldn't discount him, even though we picked 4-1.
Fair enough. We're going to make our final picks now for who we think is going to win the tournament. And Michael Hamilton, I think you're going to win this match, and I think you're going to win this tournament. I think he's going to get by Gerard Fabiano. And then once he gets past that, I think he's going to be going up against Aaron Barich. And I think both decks very, very explosive. But, and this is going to sound a little weird, I don't think Barich decks wants to get hit by a Burning Inquiry. And I think there's enough removal and you can make things off balance enough for him to get by Infect. And this Hollow One deck is pretty explosive, good deck. And Lingering Souls is pretty good against Infect too. So Michael Hamilton with Mardu Hollow One, a deck I'm not particularly fond of. I think this bracket's pretty good for you. Come on down, get yourself a title and whatever token you want. To you, Todd.
So I think this tournament can shake down in a lot of ways. But most importantly, I think that Aaron Barich's only bad matchup is going to be the Mardu Pyromancer deck or Gerard Fabiano. These 2 decks have a ton of removal, and those are the kind of decks that prey on Infect. But I think that they're both in bad matchups in the quarterfinals. And if Barich makes it out of the quarterfinals and neither of those 2 make it out of the quarterfinals, Barich has an easy road to victory. I'm picking Aaron Barich. I think he's going to take it down. But if Gerard wins or Mardu Pyromancer gets to the second round, things could change drastically.
Fair enough. I'm going to you, Matthias.
In all the top 8 matches, the consensus pick was the non-interactive deck, the linear decks, and so then we're going to look at racing speed, and that's what's going to be mattering in the top 4. If all of them break that way, and we have 4 proactive decks, and it's a race, I really like Zach Elsick's chances here. Clan Ironworks, I think the only deck that competes with it on speed is Infect, so if he hits Aaron Barich, it's pretty coin flip, but then again, you look at Zach's deck, I think he can win that as well. I'll pick him to win.
Do you think he's going to win the race if Aaron's on the play in a second seed against Zach Elsick? He is going to be on the play in that matchup.
It's a 5-game set, so I think the play is less important, but you make a good point.
Ryan, I'm coming to you to close it up.
Yeah, I agree with most of what Todd was saying about Barich's position in the top 8. The exception being, I think Infect can really hang with the control decks too. In this tournament, we covered Barich against Stempo. Stempo had multiple points of interaction across every turn of every game. and just lost some of them, and he ended up losing the match. I think Infect can really hang with all of these. I disagree with Matthias. I feel like Infect's maybe most favored against Clark-Clan Ironworks. Here's the faster combo deck. I really like Barrich here, and I also want to give him that edge. It's modern. He's playing Infect, which he has for the last 100 years, and he's just at home.
Fair enough. Nick Miller's going to close out Barrich, too. So we got 3 going to Aaron Barrich, 1 lone Michael Hamilton, and 1 Zach Elsek. We have to get ready to see how things are going to shake out. So we're going to take a short break here from the Berglund Center in Roanoke, Virginia, and we do come back. Todd and I will kick things off here for you. We're going to watch Michael Hamilton and Gerard Fabiano. It should be a very entertaining affair. We'll make our way through our quarters. Our second quarters, Ryan and Matthias will take care of, and then we'll kind of jump back and forth semi, and then a final match, and we'll crown ourselves a champion here in Roanoke. Stick and stay. See you back here just a bit.